Count it in. Eyes up, record. Sunday night, silver flicker in the blue. Blink on, blink back, what did it do? Night vision up, heartbeat on the grid. I've lost tapes before, this one won't be hit. South sky blooms like an angel made of glass. Shapes in the dark, a spell they cast. Left brain, right brain, hold that frame. Pin the event, date, place, name. I am the observer, eyes on the unknown.
My name is Dale, and I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. We're starting a new series. I've been really troubled by the fact that experiencers, abductees, whatever you want to call them, they haven't really been getting much attention. There's a lot of stuff going on out there in the hearings and stuff, but for some reason, they seem to be the forgotten group. And so I thought, well, what do you do about it? Well, I'll start a series on it. And I was thinking to myself, who would be best to bring on as the first guest? And I've got to meet Jason Sands a few months ago, had him on the podcast back in February, and we've become good friends over that time. And I thought, you know, Jason will be a great representative of experiencers. Let me go ahead and read his biography for you real quick. Jason Sands is a former U.S. Air Force serviceman and whistleblower who has publicly described his experiences involving unidentified anomalous phenomenon and non-human intelligence, otherwise known as NHI. He speaks about these encounters to promote transparency and broader discussion about advanced technologies and their implications for humanity. Sands advocates for greater public awareness and accountability surrounding what he believes has been concealed from the public. And so, without any further ado, let me bring the one and only Jason Sands onto the stage. Jason, it's so good to have you back. And I really loved our conversation that we had yesterday. Now, remind me, what state are you living in?
I'm currently living in Alabama.
Alabama. So what's the weather like in Alabama today?
It's about 80, mid 80s right now. It's been that way for last few days, but it did spike last week up into the 90s. So it's
there's a difference. There's a difference between 80 in Alabama and 80 in Oregon. 80 in Oregon is heaven. 80 in Alabama, I imagine, is quite humid, right?
Yeah, it's humid today. Yesterday was a bit drier. So, yeah, it did make a big difference. So, yeah, you're right. The humidity really is a big factor. I could handle the dry heat a lot better when I was in Vegas or in Nevada. Yeah, that was easier to take. A bit like a hair blow dryer kind of effect, but the humidity just knocks you out.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. I spent 5 years in Illinois, and I did not like the humidity. I could not wait to get back out west. We get a lot of rain. A lot of people complain about that. They talk about depression and everything else. But when I lived in Illinois, we had so much snow. We had blizzards. We had tornadoes and all that stuff. And I'm just like, okay, I can live with the rain in Oregon. That's not so bad. Let's go ahead and begin the podcast. Like I said, we're doing an experiencer series. Right now we've got Jason Sands with us. We're going to have Deborah Jordan Cobble. Sometimes I get my words twisted because she's known as Kathy Davis from Bud Hopkins' book Intruder. She is considered the main character in that book, so she'll be coming up in about a month. And then we also, in 2 weeks, we're going to have Tom Thompson, also known as Cortex Zero, and he's going to come on and share his experiences. And so we got a good lineup already. Ray Hardy, I haven't got a date on him yet, but he's a friend of mine, an experiencer. It's had some incredible things happen. So we're going to have him on as well. And then we're going to keep going, and we're going to bring in a number of more experiencers because we want to make sure that all voices are represented. and we don't want to just tilt this one way or the other. And so we want to make sure that we're fair. So let's go ahead and start with your first experience. That was when you were 5 years old. You were living in England at the time, and that's because your dad was in the service. What branch of the service was he in?
He was in the United States Army and was working at Menwith Hill Station, which I worked at too in my career. We kind of had parallel careers, as I've spoken before. But yeah, I was born there in England as an American overseas.
I think you reminded me that, you know, your dad had top secret clearance, and so there was a lot of stuff that he couldn't tell you until you got your clearances. And so that must have been a pretty cool conversation, you know, father and son, where you can finally open up and you know, talk about some things.
He had the Army's Q clearance stuff under his belt as well. I think I remember last time we talked that he brought home genetically altered tomatoes that he loved. And that was part of the program he was in. Was they did genetics on different types of bioorganisms like tomatoes and things like that. But he always had those in the backyard. Loved them, and I just remember that being a staple thing all through our lives.
So yeah, were they like bigger? What was the difference?
They were huge. Yeah, they were huge, very tasty. Yeah, just like a big fat grapefruit-sized tomato.
Oh wow, those are big. Yeah, never worry about what it might have done to them, any side effects or anything.
I knew nothing about it until I was in my adulthood, and yeah, and we got to talking about it. And he just said, "You know them tomatoes," and he mentioned all of that stuff. So,
okay, so you're in England. You're 5 years old. You're walking home, and all of a sudden you're assaulted.
Yeah,
I'm assaulted. Walk us through that.
Yeah, I got assaulted by a man on the way home, pedophile. He, I guess, had been profiling me because back then kids would generally walk home from school quite often and not have a parent or an adult around. And in this case, my sister wasn't even walking with me, and she ended up at a friend's house, and that's when he took it as a target of opportunity. And he did knock me out, knock me to the ground. I lost my vision. I could still hear and kind of move, but I felt like I couldn't move my arms until these two gentlemen, who I thought were police officers, showed up and got him off me, and scared the living daylights out of him, apparently, because he sounded like, after he saw who they were, that he just screamed bloody hell and ran away in the distance, and his voice faded off like he'd fallen off a cliff at one point, and I didn't hear it anymore. But those two gentlemen were not police officers. They helped me get back to my house and even unlocked my door when it was locked.
Can you give us a description of them? Tell them what they look like?
Give
everybody a visual of them?
I didn't know what they looked like. And like I said, I was blind, or temporary blind. I was on my front door step outside with them, and that's when I told them, look, I can't even find the key hole to put my key in the house lock, and all that good stuff. So I just said, I can't see, I'm blind. And one of them touched me on my right temple, my left temple. And then I could start to see things. It kind of came in blurry at first, just kind of like an out of focus camera thing. But as my vision cleared, I could see they both had like platinum blonde hair, striking blue eyes, very fair skinned. They looked, very handsome, I guess, if you want to say that. But they were very much looking like twins, but not exact identical twins. They had a lot of features together, but they looked like brothers. They were about the same age or something. And they stood not too much taller than I did, maybe 4 or 5 foot tall, 4.5 foot to 5 foot tall, and they just opened the door like it wasn't locked. So
wow.
That's when I went inside the threshold of the door, and when I stepped in, I turned around to thank them both, and they had just gone. And I looked out the door, and the street where I lived at that point was bone straight, and there's no way they could have hidden within that amount of time. But my head was throbbing, had a huge headache, and then I just went in, laid down on the couch, went to sleep until I believe it was my mother came home first that day, and she asked me what happened. But that's what they looked like, and that was the first encounter I had. Was at about 5 years old.
Well, I was thinking about what a stark contrast between a pedophile hitting you over the head. What did he hit you with? Do you ever know what it was?
Yeah, it was one of those leather bags that has like lead shot inside
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. But I mean, you think about the contrast for a minute, Jason. On the one sense, let me get you switch back on. On the one hand, you have this pedophile, and he's coming to get you. And he's basically almost knocked you out. These two aliens, these two men at first, you think they're men until your eyes are, open. They come along, and not only they rescue you from that, but then they help give you, most of your eyesight back at the time. That's how you were able to identify them. And so, I mean, it's a lot to take in, and I've thought a lot about it, since our last podcast, and understanding how devastating sexual abuse is on young children, both male and female. And so, what they saved you from was extraordinary, and then they healed your eyes as well. How did that shape your view of aliens growing up, since that was your first encounter?
It was very hard for me to understand it. I just was thankful that somebody had saved me, mainly in that I didn't care how they were dressed. They were dressed in those gray, like one-piece suits with, kind of tight fitting to their body, just a little bit loose, and a blue sash around their waist. And that was strange. I've never seen anybody, you're talking, it was late 60s, 1960s, so people didn't really dress that way. I told my mom, and they did return the next day to check up on me. My mother did see them, and she describes them the exact same way. But she asked me not to mention it again, and that, she was thankful that I was okay. I'd had a nasty bump on my head that we had to keep the ice on for a day or two. And so I just, when you have something strange like that you just can't understand, you just kind of tend to, you got school the next day, you got to, you just get back up and you start walking again. And so that's kind of how it went. At 5 years old, you don't understand a lot. I was kind of naive, and I just trusted in my mother and just was thankful that I'd been saved from that situation.
So you said they were handsome. That's one of the terms that people use a lot of times for Nordics. And so is that in your impression? If you had to guess who they were, would that be who you think that they were?
That's who I identify them with, is with the Nordics. Yeah. The Nordics seem to be the one that fits the bill the closest.
Yeah, I don't remember if Deborah Jordan Cobble said that the three blonde kids that came, I don't remember if she ever said they were Nordics, but I wouldn't be surprised in her encounter if they weren't. And then we also know that Travis Walton, two of the beings that he described with helmets over their head, appeared to be what are Nordics as well. And so you said your mom told you not to say anything. Generally, did you feel like you were believed?
Yeah, my mom was kind of in and out. My Nana, she was just like, oh, he's just making things up or whatever. She didn't want to talk about it at all with me, that kind of thing. But my mother was more understanding, and she believed, especially once they showed up the next day. That's when both my Nana and my mother both were like, oh, this was real.
Did they know they were aliens?
They thought they were dressed strangely, but no, they were like, not convinced of what they were encountering, because they agreed.
They looked human-like.
Yeah, they looked human-like, that they were short. They were wearing the same exact uniforms that I described to you, and they got to see that firsthand. And when my mom went in to get them a cup of tea and invite them in to thank them, they disappeared on her just like they did me, and she couldn't figure that out either.
How they got out of there and stuff, huh?
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you have? Because we had a great conversation yesterday. We talked about an hour on the phone, and we've all had those experiences where we're not believed. And I told you of one that happened where I shared something with someone, and it just felt like they didn't believe me, and that's a hard thing, when you tell somebody something and they don't. So, what's your advice to maybe somebody who's younger today? Maybe they're 15, maybe they're 18, maybe they're 21, and they're having a hard time getting people to believe them. What kind of advice do you have for them?
Just that you can't convince everybody. And there are people that are completely ugly people that they're like bullies or mockers. They're not even critics. They just beat up on people just because they feel like that gives them some form of entertainment or gratification. And that's what you can't stop. But I would say be reassured that you know what you saw, that you're not telling lies, and that should get you through, because that's what gets me through. I don't care about all the dissenters. I know I'm not lying, so I just take kind of pride in the fact that I know I'm telling the truth all the time. To the best of my knowledge, I will not stop doing that, or to the best of my ability, I will not stop doing that all the rest of my life, and I've been that way all my life. And I just don't let it bother me. After a while, you get used to it, and that's what I would say is just kind of overcome that with your own confidence in yourself, and don't worry about these other people and what they say, because they weren't there. They weren't standing there with you to observe all of this stuff. And it's like talking to a person that you're the one who saw somebody shot or hurt, and then some guy in the next town over, or even in a different country, gets their own opinions about it. If you think about it, they're kind of silly to come up with all these imagined things. It's like, no, you can't just make up stuff when people are telling you something and they're being honest. And we do that all the time in our court systems. So it's one of those things that's just, people are nasty, and you can't change them. And, as a matter of fact, I kind of feel sorry for them, because they are like that. And, if they treat others like that and their family members, I'm sure they're not liked for it. And they probably get a lot of guff for being obnoxious.
Yeah. And I think the other side of it is, and we talked about that as well, is that unless it's happened to you, I mean, some of this stuff is really, really weird. And I shared something in one of the podcasts that I wished I hadn't. I overshared, felt gutted afterwards. And but I hope to get to where a friend of mine is. And that is where you just don't care. It's true. And they can either believe it or they don't believe it. And I don't know why I'm not quite there yet. Most of the stuff, I mean, you talk about aliens, craft, you talk about ghost stuff. That stuff, you don't usually get the blank stares or whatever. But there's some stuff out there that is just reality changing. And if it, like I said, if some of them hadn't happened to you, Jason, I'm sure that you might not have believed it. You might have questioned it. But you wouldn't have been a jerk about it, which is the one of the downsides of social media, is that, you get, in some cases, you get victimized through your experience. At the very least, you're not ready for it. And then all of a sudden you get attacked a second time, for that. Did they ever catch that pedophile?
I don't know what happened. Like I said, he ran away. And like I said, it sounded like his voice just fell off a cliff at one point. But he was screaming bloody murder the whole way, and kept on screaming, what the hell are you? What the hell are you? All the way as he went off in the distance. And I don't know exactly what happened to him, to tell you the truth.
I'm a pretty graceful and loving man, but it wouldn't have bothered me if they dropped him off about 16,000 feet up.
Yeah, I'm hoping that cliff face kind of a drop off of his voice was him going into the pit of hell. Honestly,
because you can't do that. You can't do something like that to kids. I mean, of all people in the world, 5-year-old kids. Now, here's the thing we talked about yesterday, and it's a question that that other people have to kind of battle with? I don't know if you know you've had to battle with it, but you've heard the stories of like a plane crashes and everybody dies but one, and it's called survivor's guilt. And so we look at things in life where, you know, something happens for one, but it doesn't happen for everyone else. And so the fact that when you were attacked by this pedophile, that the aliens came to your rescue, have you ever wrestled with, why me? I mean, of all the people that all the boys they could have rescued, or boys or girls, why did they choose you, Jason Sands?
There's two things that come to mind. The first one I find more plausible is just they happened to be in the area at the time, and they saw what was going on, and they felt they could prevent it, or intervene. And the other one is that some other people have always said that, you know, when you encounter these beings, they kind of look into they can look in the future, in the past, or whatever, and that there's never a time when they intervene or talk to us that hasn't been planned. So those are the two theories. Take whichever one you wish. I tend to err on the side that they just happened to be in the area at the time, and that they took an interest in me later on. That's the other part, though, that leads me to think it might have been option two, that there's something about me and my family that they keep tracking on. Because they showed up again in San Jose, California when I was a
that one's coming up. And I was going to put a third option, but you pretty much laid your second option out, as because I know Yvonne Smith. I'm an experiencer myself. I talk to a lot of other experiencers, and really there is a pattern if you study it. First of all, it seems to be intergenerational. The other thing it seems to be is it seems to begin in childhood somewhere, usually from like 4 to 7. You have your first experience. You had your first encounter at 5. But I guess by the same token, it could be, maybe you're at the right place at the right time. But imagine they see a lot, and the fact that they specifically stepped in to save you, because honestly, if they hadn't stepped in, there's no way that you're going to be the man that you are today, because what sexual abuse does to people and how it changes them. And it's something that haunts them the rest of their lives. And so that was a big save. Have you sought out any therapy for the stuff that's happened, to PTSD and stuff like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, not only did that happen to me in childhood, but at that time, my dad, is a recovered alcoholic, but at that time he was still in the thick of his alcoholism. So yeah, I had PTSD, and being in the Air Force, the kind of missions that I would run, I was forced to have to listen to, other telecommunications, and people have a real ugly side to them, and being exposed to that didn't help my PTSD. So they gave me therapy, and I'd have to say it was only after probably 20 years of them attempting to fix me that I finally was in the right state of mind to take the therapy properly and actually want it to work. Up until then, sometimes you're your own worst enemy when it comes to healing. Because I would, up until that point, I tried to either suppress it or use some other thing, but sometimes it would come out in anger. And
That's a big one.
And just leave me alone kind of attitude. But I'm pretty much over that now. So yes, I've had therapy for that. And you can lump in really all my PTSD into that therapy, whether it was that incident with the pedophile, my dad, and the violence, or the stuff I had to deal with in the military.
I can relate with the dad side. I used to talk more about it. I don't talk much because, I don't want to dishonor my dad. My dad was a very smart man. When he wasn't drinking, he was a very good man. But when that alcohol got into his body, I mean, he was just not the kind of dad that anybody would want. I just wish that there was no such thing as alcohol, because I can only imagine the life we could have had. But it made me that much more grateful for my mom. My mom raised basically 5 kids of us by ourselves. We lost her in January, and it was a big loss, because she was not only my mom, she was my dad. She took both roles from age 7 and up. Why do you think it is? I mean, I want you to think, we're going to be gearing towards the military in a little bit, but why do you think that servicemen and women are so reluctant to go into therapy, to see a psychiatrist or a therapist?
Well, I know, at least for me, in the time frame that I joined the military, it was still brown shoe days, and you just suck it up, suck it up, cupcake kind of attitude all the time, no matter what the problem was. So on top of that, when you have a clearance, the other thing was just everything could get you in trouble and lose your clearance. Everybody just had that fear all the time about everything, so it's a lot different culture back then. Now it's a little bit more understanding. It's not lenient, but it's understanding that people do make mistakes, and they don't sit there and threaten you day and night about all those kinds of things, or kick you in the butt when they don't like what you're saying, that kind of stuff. Whereas back in the 80s, 90s, I'd say, yeah, you get in big trouble for stuff sometimes.
Well, it's like you think about the pilots in the old days. They didn't want to go see a shrink, or they didn't want to go see a psychiatrist or a therapist, because then they might not be allowed to fly anymore. Their flight privileges might be taken away. And so that was going to be my next question, is whether you were afraid of losing your security clearance, and you answered it already. So
yeah, you're right.
How do we get to the point where people can actually get help without having to worry about losing your security clearance, losing the right to fly?
I think the one thing that I believed, and now look at it as a lie that I made up in my own head, or allowed others to convince me of, and that is, even when you signed a Black World Q clearance NDA, there is one thing that will always outshine any NDA, and that is, because see, the NDA is for a program that's being run through the proper authorities, and there's no fraud, waste, and abuse, and that your boss is actually a good person and intends to execute the mission. But the lie that I was believing was that I couldn't say anything at all. But if I had observed fraud, waste, and abuse, this is what I believe now, and this is the truth, is that if you observe those kinds of things or misconduct, you now have a better set of processes now than we ever had before for whistleblowers, that you can say something about it regardless of your NDA, because that's the one thing that no matter where you're at or what position you're holding or what clearance you have, if you see fraud, waste, and abuse, your responsibility is to report that. Now, your boss may not like it because he may be part of the problem, and that's really the only other drawback to the whole thing about coming forward, is that, do you really think your boss can reach out and touch you if you rat on them, or tell them, or tell another authority that, hey, I think I just saw something that shouldn't be happening?
You have to go up the chain of command. Is that the way it worked?
That's the other thing, is you don't have to do that either. You can jump right to Congress in some of these black programs, because I'd say that being a whistleblower on the UAP topic, I didn't trust the Department of War even, because they're the ones who head that up at the Pentagon. They're the ones that know about all the black programs, and they're the ones who warehouse that stuff and feed money into it, or into that machine. And likewise, the Congress has certain committee members that are read in and are just in the woodwork, and you wouldn't know who they were walking down the hallway, but they also know how this all works. So even going to Congress comes with some risk if you brush up against some of these folks in the Pentagon and at that level. So going up the chain of command is something that your boss would like you to do. Try to resolve it at the lowest level. And yes, I would say that if it came to personal interrelationships at the workplace, yeah, I'd follow the chain of command and say, look, this guy's been, ticking me off for ages now. I'm sick of it. Let's try to resolve this, and have the boss in the room. That should remain at the lowest possible level. However, if there's fraud, waste, and abuse within a black program, those authorities are almost presidential level type people that are involved. You can't just go up your chain of command, because somebody is going to stop you.
Yeah, I think it's good that they have something, because when I was in the Navy, that's you had to go through the chain of command, and if you went above the outside of the chain of command, then you were in trouble because you did it the wrong way. You're always supposed to do it, and it's like, well, what happens if it's the guy above you? It's like and it's like, well, what do you do then? You can't really go to him and complain about him. So, to me, that was kind of a broken system.
I had some of those reactions when I was a whistleblower as well. Well, you can't just jump up there. Well, I found out that yes, you can, and honestly, I didn't know who I could trust in my workplace anymore. I didn't know who I could trust in the Pentagon. I knew there were certain people that I needed to avoid in the congressional committee members.
So how'd that make you feel?
It made
When
me
you
feel
realized
like,
where you were at and what was going on now, you're kind of in like almost like a spook world.
yes, and that's kind of it too. There is a kind of a silent code of conduct when you're in special forces and things like that and working with them. But yeah, you just don't talk about the mission stuff, and that's not what my purpose was. So I've always had a good head on my shoulders about what exactly I wanted to say and why I wanted to say it. And I could hopefully have some wisdom also to know when my boss was feeding me a line of BS about you keep it at my level. It's like, no, I know why you want me to keep it at your level. I'm too smart for that, but I would just say, yes, sir. And then I'd go off and do what I knew I needed to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't a rebel or anything, but it was an extreme case when I went to Congress,
Yeah. And one of the things we in our discussion is one of the difference between you and some of the other whistleblowers is that you've been a little more forthcoming and been able to provide a little more information. And I think when we talked about it, the difference between you and them is they are erring on the side of caution. You kind of know what you can say and what you can't say, and you're pushing it right up to the envelope, and you're saying exactly as much as you can possibly say. Let's talk about DOPSR for a minute, because my last podcast, it seemed like there's a lot of confusion about the DOPSR process. When they bring you in, and you've gone through DOPSR, right? Okay.
Yes.
When they bring you in, they don't set you down and tell you what to say, do they?
No, you actually write up what it is you want to discuss, and then they take those ideas or those things that you wish to discuss, and they give it to who they think is the authoritative organization. And in my case, in many of the whistleblowers' cases, it went to Arrow. They'd look over our DOPSR request, and they would go through and go, okay, you can say all this, but not that in public. And they do the same thing with the intel community. They give them an opportunity to have a whack at what you can and cannot say. And really anybody else that they feel has the authority to have a dog in the fight as to, what the government might have beef with or not. And like I told you behind the scenes yesterday, yes, there was only one item, and that was the location and the people I work for. I couldn't mention that. But it was not for a classified information purpose. It was because of operational security and personal safety that they told me not to mention that.
So let's make sure we're clear on this. So just because you've gone through DOPSR doesn't mean you're being controlled, correct? That you're being told to spin this narrative. You're just basically being told what you cannot say for security reasons, national security reasons, that it might compromise something. That's what the process of DOPSR is all about, correct?
Correct. Yes, it's a way to vet, these really exotic topics that people really don't have a good feel for. And honestly, I probably have an even better idea of what I can talk about than even Arrow does, because I was the guy helping to write the reports off the missions that we had, all these telecommunications, about all the different things that we had heard from the directors, the colonels, the generals, the scientists, the engineers, and we had to look up and verify the classification level for all of those items, those line items that we had captured during our missions, and might have been a security vulnerability. So because of that, we were very familiar with the security classification guides within that Blackwell program.
Right.
And Arrow probably doesn't have that depth of knowledge about it, nor did they have the nuances of what the classification markings were back in the 90s when I was in.
Right. Have you seen Disclosure Day yet?
No, I have not.
Oh, that's too bad. Because Daniel Kellner, he's working as a military contractor. He gets out all these different flash drives, and I'll try not to say too much in case
Yeah,
something
don't
happens.
ruin
But
the movie for me.
it, it was it was it, it was catastrophic disclosure. The way I looked at it, it was somebody that did not go through DOPSR, and I can be honest with you that there's a part of me that goes, that's what it's going to take, because I'm just, and maybe, and I hope I'm wrong, I really do, but I know I'm not alone in this. A lot of us are just getting skeptical of the fact that the government's ever going to admit and bring about disclosure. I hope I'm wrong. I've seen this, and I don't get on the roller coaster, but it seems like every few months, maybe 6 months, there's something comes out and everybody's all hyped and excited about it. And this is going to be disclosure. This is going to be disclosure. And then it comes and goes and it's not disclosure. And that's why I tell everyone, stay even keel. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. But, how would you feel if somebody actually came out? I mean, we wouldn't want them hurting national security or anything like that. But how would you feel if somebody actually just said, to heck with it? It's not, if this is the only way it's going to happen.
I would tell them, I probably feel a little bit pissed off because that's not how it's done. As much as people think that, I've said too much or whatever, I know I haven't said too much. I'm the guy who knows the classification guides.
You're not in jail.
But, there is a process to all of that. And even some of the things and the steps I had to take, because going to Congress, that was the first time for me. I needed David Grush and some of the other folks to tell me how it goes. And they're the ones who ushered me in to go to Arrow, because they had stood up and had the responsibility to also hear my story. And then I had to go see the ICIG the next month. And then I had to finish my DOPSR the next month. So yeah, it extended all the way up until when David Grush and Fravor and Ryan Graves and all those guys, they all came forward in that the congressional hearing. And my DOPSR got got approved the following week. So I was still tied up in paperwork and I couldn't go there, even though I was asked.
Would you feel the same way if 20 years from now we're exactly where we're at?
No, we're never going back. And it's going to continue to go down to the point where I think what's going to happen is the folks in these programs are going to finally realize, oh, this isn't as bad as we imagined it to be during all these years of being scared of nuclear holocaust and what we found in the desert and the beings that we are now aware of, and all the technologies that brings to the table. The only thing that we can rely on, the fact that they won't tell us, are the national security things dealing with the weapons that they have produced from all of that.
Right.
They should feel a great deal of relief that we are approaching that day, because number one, it'll get a monkey off their back. They don't have to lie about being alone anymore. And number two, they'll also have an avenue to produce the technologies and give those to people that are really going to use it for humanitarian reasons and not just war.
That would be the plus right there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that would absolutely.
that's the only part that they need to really get comfortable with, is what are they actually talking about with this disclosure. We're not asking you for the scary stuff here, guys. I've been there and worked with you guys, and this isn't scary. Just hiding behind these lies is creating more problems now than it ever did before. And hopefully they can see that it is unfruitful to be going after American citizens. That's not called for, especially if all the person is like me, is saying we're not alone. There are technologies that can benefit mankind. And that's all I want to say. I don't want to talk to you about the stuff that Russia wants me to tell, and China about our weapon systems. I will never give that away. And once they get comfortable with that, I think that if all the whistleblowers can be on that level playing field, we'll be okay. But as you say, that kind of what did you call it? The disclosure type.
Catastrophic.
Catastrophic disclosure. Yeah, if somebody goes off rogue like that, yeah, they're going to mess that all up.
Okay. Well, here's the other problem, and Ron James put it out. It's not enough to come out and make claims. If you're going to end up ruining your life, you're going to probably end up going to prison if you don't have evidence, and you're never going to, probably the way our security systems are, you're never going to walk out of any of those places with actual evidence. He recommended that people not do that. I don't think the term catastrophic disclosure in the sense of people being ready, I guess, Ron pointed out a few good things in the last podcast that, depends on what disclosure looks like and what are you going to disclose and how much are you going to disclose.
Exactly.
But if it's the simple disclosure that we're not alone in the universe, I think most of us, honestly, Jason, we could start with that and be pretty happy, especially on the experiencer side, because once you say that, then people have to start looking at experiencers differently. Once they acknowledge that we are not alone and that we are being visited, then abductions and stuff like that are not such a far reach and stuff. So I think a lot of us, that's what we want. And it's crazy that the government will not give us that, with so many people coming out, with the age of disclosure, with Disclosure Day, with all of the different hearings and all the whistleblowers that have come out. I've heard they're talking about doing another hearing, but my question is, what are they going to bring up that isn't what we've already seen? It's like all these videos that are coming out. They haven't come out with that one that you could really look out and say, this is it. This is going to prove once and for all. And they're exciting to look at. They're interesting to look at, but we haven't got anything that has convinced a skeptic that this stuff is UAP. And so until we do, I think we just have to say we want more than that. We want more than that. You've described spending years carrying experiences that most people would find very impossible to believe, and that's true even of experiencers. Sometimes we don't want to believe, especially if you're a rational person. I mean, this stuff is just, it sounds crazy. It's crazy when you experience it, and then when you try to tell somebody about it, it sounds even crazier. And it's like, that's why a lot of us keep our mouths shut and we don't say anything, because we don't want people to think that we're crazy. And so let me add to that. What has been the personal cost of coming forward? And was there ever a moment where you considered keeping quiet?
I wanted to keep quiet several times and just keep up a few other times on top of that. And it's because it's not an easy track, honestly. And there are some things that I've had to learn to deal with, like the people that are ugly to me and other whistleblowers and experiencers. But that shouldn't stop us either, because everything that you said that you wish was in our disclosure about the aliens being real, that the craft is real. We've got thousands of people that have already seen them firsthand. It's just we're not allowing them to be heard or to be believed, because we have skeptics. And the skeptics, just like in a court case, they're there to throw a shadow of a doubt at anybody that they are trying to, or a position that they're trying to defend. And to me, it's a bit unfair. You're right. I can't bring out a UFO out of area, whatever, on the Nellis test range, and say, "Oh, here you go. I'm just going to lay it down here on the road here for you to explore to your heart's content." I can't do that. But what I have produced is all the facts about who I am, where I was, what I've done, and that kind of thing, and other things in classified environments where I've actually named names and places and things that I actually participated in. And there's not a single soul in any of these authorized committees or people that processed me and other whistleblowers have ever come back out and said, "Hey, we can't believe you on this account." And, never even had that discussion at all. It was just, tell us what you know. I left, and that's it. They've never contacted me to clarify anything that I said, and they're the ones with the authority. They've got the ones with the resources. I hate to say it, that as many journalists are around, or just couch potato people that have opinions, they don't have the resources that our government does. And those are the people that vetted me and the rest of the whistleblowers. If they ain't good enough, you got a problem with our judicial system and the way it works, and the victims that have experienced, crimes. It's the same thought that you should hold with the whistleblowers as well. So, all in all, I think that that's been the tough part, is having people that are just ugly and having to deal with them. But at the end of the day, I know I'm telling the truth. I've never had anybody that had the authority to investigate me and what I said tell me I wasn't telling the truth. So help me God, that's exactly the way it's happened. And with a lot of the other whistleblowers that I know of, that's the same thing. So, like it or not, if you're just opinionated, you're sounding more and more like a fool every day that you keep speaking against the whistleblowers.
Well, it seems like for a lot of the whistleblowers, there has been some kind of repercussion. I remember at one of the hearings, it was scuttlebutt, but it kind of was mentioned a little bit about somebody being approached with a gun. And I heard through the grapevine, through people I know, that was probably David Grush. And had you been threatened, or what kind of repercussions have you faced for coming out?
They have let me know that my presence, or their presence, is there. They broke into my car a few times on the NSA campus. You can't just walk on that campus without credentials. So it was somebody with a clearance in the government that did that. I am surveilled off and on. Like right now, I'm being surveilled. They mostly stay away from me physically. However, they some of the things they did, like leaving my car doors broken into, they're letting me know we can touch you anytime we feel like it. And who knows? Maybe when I've been asleep, maybe they've injected me with something and did stuff to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't checked my body for a while. But they do have the scanners. Maybe I ought to scan myself every once in a while just to make sure they haven't put a device.
We'll get to the other experience in a little bit. But it's like, so they've already done it, so that wouldn't be surprising. But some of that is probably just intentional, so that that they're watching. They're not even doing it secretly. They're doing it, overtly. They're making sure that you're aware, to kind of, to press you to make sure you don't step out of line and share something that you're not supposed to. Because the second you do, they're going to know about it.
Yep.
And so that pressure. Do you ever feel like there was a time where you look back now and you go, I wish I would have just shut up. I wish I'd have never said anything. Do you have any moments like that?
Yeah, but it's not for the reasons that most people would think. The only reason that I thought, like, I was just like, man, I wish I never got involved in this. It's mainly because of all the skeptics. They really can get under your skin if you let them. And that's when I decided, wait a minute. I can't let these guys who know nothing about anything and have no authority to even investigate anything bother me. I need to put them in their place, and rather than they try to put me in a box. And that's the way I've got through that. But yeah, at one point that's when I had some of those decision-making moments where I was like, okay, am I going to continue this walk, or am I just going to quit? I've needed a break here and there, especially when somebody presses me on some of the darker stuff that I got involved with on missions and stuff that really brings out the PTSD. It took me probably a good 2 to 3 weeks to recover from the first time that somebody pressed me on that. And then they attacked me right after that, right in the midst of me having a flashback attack. Quite frankly, if they were in the room with me, I probably would have knocked their fucking teeth in.
Yeah. Well, that, what was going to lead to my next question. You kind of led us right into it. You went on Joe Rogan. I mean, like the biggest podcast in America, millions of viewers. And so what surprised you the most about the responses that you got, both positive and negative?
I focus mainly on the positive, but I think the response from the people that are truly experiencers and truly believers are the ones that really mean the most to me. They are very supportive. they're skeptical at times, but they do it in the proper way, the respectful way, rather than some of these other people that are totally doing it just to bully somebody.
12-year-old kids.
Exactly. It's like having a 3-year-old fighting over a piece of candy.
Yeah.
You know. So that's what I home in on. But the good things that I've had since then, I've had people reach out to me on a very regular basis. Hey, checking in, just like you do with me sometimes. Hey, how's it going, brother? And yeah, we need to keep doing that. We all need to do that as a community of people, of experiencers, because any one of us can have a bad day, and yeah, it'll throw you.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing that I've seen, is that I wouldn't be around actually if the supporters weren't there, because and I wasn't going to think bad thoughts because of the UFO topic. It was because I was going through problems with my marriage. I was going through problems with a lot of other things, and I was in a very depressed mood. And and if it wasn't for people checking up on me, I might not have had that support and gotten out of that mindset.
Well, we definitely, and we're going to get to that towards the end, but I told my church, I'm a pastor for those that don't know it. My podcast has nothing to do about that, but I told my church that my ministry is beyond the walls of this building, and it's wherever I am. And like I said, I don't preach at anybody. I don't usually even bring it up in conversations with people, but people kind of know. And then whenever there's a need, or like you said, with checking on you or checking on some of my other friends, it's just a natural outgrowth of who I am as a human being. And I think that's how we should all be. We should all be looking out for one another. And when it comes to experiencers, it's really important that we reach out to each other, because we're the only ones. And I don't mean this in a superiority way or an egotistical way, but we are the only ones that truly understand what the other person has gone through. And that's the lesson that I've had to learn, because you would think, well, you got a community of people that believes in this. Well, yeah, that's one thing. It's one thing to believe in it. It's another thing to have experienced it as well. Let's go ahead and talk about your military career. So when did you join? When did you get out? What were your rank, and what was your rating, and all that kind of stuff?
I joined in actually 1985 in the delayed enlistment program. So my pay date was a bit earlier than when I actually joined, and that helped out for my retirement, because I could retire about 6 months earlier than normal later on in life. So yeah, I joined the
Air Force, right? You said Air Force.
Joined the Air Force, and then became a sheet metal guy. Was my first job. Did that for about 3 years. Then I had to cross train out into the intel community, and that's where I got my top secret clearance. And that's when, after my first duty assignment, I got that I had in Sembach, Germany, I went to Nellis Air Force Base, the next duty station after that, and that's where I got exposed to the first Blackwell program. After about the first 6 months or so that I was working there.
So were you recruited, or was that just like aptitude, or what was it that took you from the one rating to the other in the intel community more?
Well, at that point, I was a buck sergeant and testing for staff sergeant, which I made, the following year. I made rank. That's an E5.
Okay.
So you just kind of like starting to do supervisory tasks and things like that. So that's who I was. I met my wife there at Nellis also. Had my first 3 kids there while I was stationed there. I was stationed at Nellis for a total of 6 years. 3 of those were in the program. So yeah, I got recruited. They liked what they saw, I guess, and they saw I had a good memory. I was able to figure things out as an analyst. I had a pretty good intuition, and then went to RAF Mildenhall after that assignment and saw a giant orb going to work one morning. And then after England, I went to Hawaii, and that was where they trained me to be a joint staff member, which means I would do plans that involved not just the Air Force's plans, but there were joint plans for like the whole Pacific region with the Army, the Marines, the Navy, everybody involved with that. That's why they call it joint planning. So I went to school to do that, did that for 3 years, had a really good time doing that, got right into another 140, 150 Black World programs during that tour. And then after that, I was given a choice to either go to Colorado and work at Buckley and copy satellite data and whatever else they do there. I also made rank because I made E6 while I was in RAF Mildenhall. I made E7 while I was in Hawaii. And then instead of going to Colorado to work with Buckley and more Black World stuff, I said I'd like to go to Florida because I knew it was going to be my last tour of duty. So I made it more of a family decision. And I told them, well, here's our two choices. You want to live in Colorado and retire with me, or do you want to go to Florida where they're standing up a unit where I'll be the superintendent? And they said, oh, Daddy, we want to go to Florida. So I made that decision, and it was the right decision. So I stayed in another year just for high year tenure purposes. And so that's when you max out your amount of retired pay in a given rank. So I was an E7, I made pretty good money, and I retired out and became a contractor ever since.
Okay, let's go back to Nellis for a minute, because we hear that word and those of us in the community kind of know where it is, but why don't you explain to what Nellis is and what they do out there?
The big thing that they do there are red flag exercises or flag exercises. It can be blue flags, red flags. There's a maple flag that takes place up in Canada even that's attached to that same mission type.
So what are red flag operations, so people understand what that term means?
They are designed, these red flag exercises are designed to take pilots and put them in a wartime environment where they have to survive their radios being messed with and telecommunications of all different types and still get the bombs on target. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was there for. That's what the main thrust of the base is. The other thing that we did is just the same thing that I did for all of the telecommunications that I monitored and analyzed, is that we were there to check security and vulnerability on just about any base in the continental U.S. at Nellis. At least my unit did. And we were all trained on how to tap into telephones and listen to radios, and then cell phones and everything else that came along after, and fax machines when they came, all that stuff. Whatever emails, we monitor all that stuff. And what we're doing is we're being asked by the base commanders to come and run a mission and say, where are my intelligence leaks? Where are my security vulnerabilities? And then brief them on that after our 2-week mission. And we usually go out with a team of about 5 to 8 individuals, and take in a lot of information. So that's what I did for a living, and that's what I did for the Black program.
Okay. Well, let's move into that then, because when did it become dark? And specifically what incident I'm talking about where you got in trouble. Let's kind of lay that out. I don't think we explained it well enough last time so that people could understand. You were working with the security clearance. You were expected to be all in. You took your kids and your wife to the zoo. Is that what it was?
Yes, because we were down in New Mexico running a mission at White Sands, and at that point in time, I didn't drink. I didn't do anything that they kind of like to do on the weekends.
Right.
So I thought to myself, well, there's a zoo nearby. I'd love to see my wife and kids. That's what I was into. So I thought I wasn't doing anything wrong, because I was just like,
so you went off base, and that's...
Yeah, I wasn't even going to work on Saturday and Sunday, for crying out loud. And I was like,
you're
I
off
don't even
duty.
know where I'm working, for heaven's sake.
Right.
So I'm thinking everything's okay. They'll just pop in on Friday and then drive back home on Sunday. And I get to see my kids, and my wife. So what happens, though, is we're getting ready to go out somewhere, I think. And one of my fellow analysts sees it, and he gets a hold of me the next day, and he said, we saw you. And I was like, okay, yeah. I invited my kids down and my wife to go to the zoo. And they just said, you have no idea what you just did. And I said, really? And they started reading me the riot act. I was
So let me step in for a second because I want to make sure that everybody gets this. It was like you were doing part of a program,
yeah,
and that program they kind of wanted everybody to pretty much stay in one place, but it was your weekend off. All you did was, okay, I'm not going to go out drinking with these guys, because if you'd been with the other guys, you probably wouldn't have got in trouble at all, right?
yeah. I was just been doing what they do, and
What they did, you were kind of protected by the group. But because you had your wife and kids and you went off base and you took them to the zoo, that's when all hell broke loose, correct?
correct, yeah. So it's one of those things, and they turned me in, or they explained this to the program leads, and that's when I was asked to turn in my badge up at Indian Springs, and that was the day when I found out that they were going to put a bullet in my head, unless I did
Now,
what they said.
stop a
So
minute. You said they were going to put a bullet in your head.
yes,
My goodness. I mean, that is extreme, but it gets worse than that, though. It absolutely gets worse. I mean, most of the time you go to your job and you get in trouble, you're not being threatened
right,
that they're going to kill you. And you felt like this was which we're going to find out it was, you felt this was credible. You felt like this was every sense in your body. So when you were told that, kind of explain how your body reacted. Because I know people, when they get in life or death situations, there are things that happen, physiologically to their body. And so what did you go through?
I was in shock at first, and then I got that kind of prickly feeling you get when you realize that you just brushed death. Um, but yeah, they got back from, it was probably about a good hour that they were talking to somebody about what had happened, and that I had brought my family down to this mission site, is what they were probably telling them. And when they came back, that's when I found out that they actually fought for me to not have a bullet put in my head. But I jokingly just thought, all this time I'm like, geez, they're just turning in my badge. What else is there to this? And here an hour later, they're coming back, and I'm like, okay, so what do they want to do? Do they want to kill me? And I'm kind of laughing, like, ha ha ha, kind of thing. And they all looked really grave when they were walking up to the car in the first place, like very serious. And I remember one of them looking at me and just saying, hey, it's like, yes, they actually wanted to kill you. And I'm like, yeah. So I imagine they do. And they're like, no, they wanted to put a bullet in your head, Jason. They're going to bury you. So that's the response I got. And I was like, holy crap. And that's when that feeling of like shock, and then I got that prickly feeling of fear, kind of, my hair up, standing up on end kind of thing. And I'm like, holy moly, all I wanted to do was take my kids to the freaking zoo.
Yeah, like, what did I do wrong? When you told this,
Yeah.
in the first podcast, for whatever reason, my brain shifted that you were out of the military, that you were like a military contractor, and you have these guys that are rogue out there, and yeah, they're breaking all the rules, they're killing people. But I was in absolute shock
Yes.
when I found out you're talking about our own military.
Yes, and that's exactly who they are. Now, there may be some NHI security that was involved in that decision, but I don't know. I've heard from other experiencers, or listened to them, at least their stories, that there is a barracks where the tall whites showed up, and they were going to kill some of the guys there that they didn't like. And
so you're talking like, this is deep. This isn't like some surface level, security clearance thing. You're talking about you're deep in there, and things that they definitely don't want to get out. And if they see you as a security risk, they might just decide it's easier for you to be dead than be alive.
correct. And that's some of the mentality that they are able to get away with, which is totally unauthorized and totally illegal. That should never happen under the authority of a security manager or even a base commander.
Oh, absolutely.
They do have lethal force, but they're supposed to utilize that with wisdom and good decision making, not just because it's the status quo that they inherited from the last commander, in that, oh yeah, we treat everybody like they're a freaking communist, and we want to hang them on a tree, or we want to shoot them against a cactus out there in the desert whenever we get a chance, or they say something we don't like. And that's kind of the mentality I felt like I just realized during that experience of turning in my badge. I was like, holy crap, what kind of people are running this show? It really stuck to me all my life. It still does. I keep wondering who the hell is calling the shots in this program, because they are complete assholes.
Yeah. Well, you know, what you're talking about is on another level. I think on a surface level, when you're in the military, I remember I was on the USS Fife DD 991. Is we were told we'd stop at like Seal Beach and we'd pick up nukes. That's how we always knew when we had nukes on. We'd stop there, and they would load them, and then they would tell us, do not approach the guards that are down there guarding them, because if you approach them, they will shoot you.
Yep.
And they will not hesitate to shoot you, because they're not going to take any risk you getting, you know, you turn out to be a spy or whatever. They're not, you know, no matter how nice you are or whatever, they're going to shoot you. And so we know that, but you don't expect it like you did. But this was in Florida, correct, that you're talking about?
No, what you mean when I turned in my badge?
No. Whenever you were threatened and then you were taken down into that.
No,
room.
that was still out when I was still there stationed in Nellis.
Nellis, that was all Nellis. Okay, so you talked about them taking you downstairs. Was that like an underground base, or was that a bunker, or what would you say that facility was?
That is a tunnel entrance that's beneath a building that's there by Talisha Peak on the Nellis Test Range. That's where they took me next, because they told me that I had one more thing to have to do, and that they would be contacting me later, and we'd have to take another trip up to the range. So on that day, it was like a week or two later, and we went up to Talisha Peak, where we would run the red flag exercises out of, because, you know, we worked in the same unit, and the little trailer that had the refrigerator and microwave, a place to sit down and stuff like that. That's where we were waiting for a phone call. And then finally we got a call when it was getting about dusk that evening. And then we went on the other side of the Talisha Peak, and there's a little cantonment area. And that's where this building is that has this tunnel entrance. And that's where I got to witness them killing an NHI. And they wanted me to kill the NHI.
Yeah, let's cover that real quick. Did he put the gun in your hand, or did he point the gun to you, or how did he do that? Because he told you basically that either you kill this person, someone with this bag over their head, or they're going to kill you. Wasn't that kind of the way they said it?
Yeah, and they handed me a gun. He had another gun on him, and he instructed me to kill him. And I asked him, well, who is he? What has he done? And he's like, it doesn't matter, just kill him. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And he just takes his gun and hits him and kills him, or fatally wounds him. The being isn't dead yet, but the being is dying. And I got pissed. I just snapped, and I grabbed his gun, and I twisted his wrist and arm, and I broke his freaking arm. And I grabbed his neck with both my hands, even though they were handcuffed at the time. And I pressed him up against the wall, and I was going to twist his freaking neck off, but he squeaked out that he had a wife and kids at home, and I let him go. Mm-hmm. Then I went over to the NHI that was on the floor that just got shot. He was still alive. I was able to, cradle his head, even though I had my handcuffs on. And telepathically, as he's passing away, I feel he regrets who we are, and that we just don't know what our potential is. And he's the one that's freaking dying.
Yeah. Well, didn't he say something like that? Well, let's go through telepathy first of all. It's one of the things I wanted to hit on, because people that have never experienced it have a hard understanding of exactly how did you experience it? Was it like words? Was it more than words? Could you feel things that he was feeling? Could you feel his emotions? And did he have the same kind of emotions we do? Obviously, I think you said fear. You could tell that he was afraid or something like that. So did he have all of those different kind of emotions like we do? Curiosity, humor, disappointment.
Yeah, I'll describe all of the telepathy that I felt during that entire experience at that cantonment area. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel anything telepathically until we were in the cantonment area and about 50 feet from the building.
Right.
Then I felt this very unreasonable amount of fear and anger, in that I wanted to kill somebody. And it felt very much like I was the one feeling that way. But it wasn't coming from me because I was being escorted by my friends. And up until that instant where I felt these emotions come over me, there was no precursor thoughts in my head that would make me feel that way. So that's why I felt like it wasn't coming from me, but it was fear, anger that he wanted to kill the barbarians that had imprisoned him, kind of feeling as we were approaching the building. Then that changed once the conversation was being had between me and the security individual that wanted me to kill him, or to kill this NHI. And then it kind of went quiet and all that fearful stuff. It was like he was listening to the whole conversation. And then after he got shot, it was more just about pain, and that was about it. He wasn't fearful of dying at all, as far as I could tell. And even when I was close to him and holding his head, oh man,
That's a hard one to have to
I feel like,
relive. I'm sorry about that.
crying
That's
because it was so.
he felt sorry for us, though, right? Isn't that what he
Yeah,
told you? It's
yeah.
like he's
So,
dying.
yeah, so we reconnected, and when I was holding him, that's when he started to really talk to me telepathically, and it was very calm. He was very calm. It was like he had no fear of death, that he was more regretful that, some of the things he wanted to do were not going to be accomplished. And then he had an even bigger regret looking at me, because I could feel the appreciation he had for me.
That
But
you
at
had
the same time,
compassion.
right. And I feel like he imparted a part of him in me when that happened, because he kind of befriended me telepathically at that point. And that's when he said telepathically to me, "You have no idea what your potential is." And I could feel the regret, the emotional regret tinged inside of that telepathic message that he left with me. And then he passed away.
We don't know for sure, but I'm guessing, when you're talking about other species, that that they're probably not that much difference. They might be more technology wise, technically advanced, but you can imagine they probably have families. They probably have a spouse. You can imagine that as he's dying, as he knows he's going to die, that all those things are going through his mind as well. So I don't care whether you're human or whether you're alien or interdimensional or whatever. I think that there is a universal truth that life matters, that we don't want to die. And I'm going to give a spoiler alert right now. So if you haven't seen Hail Mary and you're planning on watching it, you might want to turn the volume down for a minute. But so go ahead and do that. If you haven't seen it, you're going to watch it. But there was one part in the movie, Hail Mary, Josh, I can't remember his last name anyway, Ryan Gosling. He is like the main character in the movie. And in the beginning of the movie, they're showing these guys volunteering because it's a one-way mission. There's something that's particles are, affecting the sun, and it's going to make the earth get lose temperature. And it's a Hail Mary. That's what the name of the show is. It's a Hail Mary effort to try to save humanity. But they know, the ones who volunteer, the scientists, everybody involved with it, they know they're not coming back. It's a one-way ticket. And what I loved about the movie was that about halfway or a little bit more through, it actually revealed, that Ryan, they gave him an option of doing it and he chose not to. And so then they really told him he didn't have an option because he was the only guy. And you see him in the movie running away, trying to run away from him, and they capture him and they ended up forcing him to go on it. But what I loved about it was that is a true human response. None of us know until that moment, how we're going to respond to a life or death situation. We like to think we would do this or that, but I really believe until you're in that moment, You know, I think if your kid was in the water, you wouldn't hesitate. You're going to jump in no matter what. But
Right.
if there's somebody else in the water and you got your kid sitting next to you, at the very least, you might hesitate. So my point is that I think life is valuable no matter what life it is. And we're talking about a human life. I hate that with the shows today. They show people getting died. There's no consequences. You have no idea in real life when a person dies, they're connected. You know, they have mothers, they have fathers, they have brothers, they have sisters, they have children, they have friends. And so we've kind of just numbed ourselves to it. But the thing I want to point out is the value of life. That life is valuable, whether it's human, alien, or otherwise. Now, you've had a couple of different exposures to NHI now. How did the second one, the first one, I'm sure must have given you somewhat of a positive, you know, hey, these guys rescued me and you felt really good. What did you take from the second episode with this alien being murdered? What did you take away from that?
You know, I've never been asked that before. I guess what I came away with is just that this program not only has been, you know, harming its own citizens, all for the sake of keeping the lie alive that we are alone, and in this universe, they really want everybody to believe that. And then on top of that, to actually exterminate another life from another place, another civilization, to keep that alive, those lies alive, is a truly horrible crime against not just humanity, but a crime against life in general. And I don't know who made those decisions to be able to do that kind of thing or why, but those people need to be held accountable. And that's what my big takeaway from that is because that was totally unjustified. And even what they did to me was unjustified. It's just they are defending an idea in their head and demanding that nothing they do be questioned. Not even by the law of the land, not even by Congress, not even by the president. I'm sure they would give him the finger too. And to have that kind of an organization in our nation is kind of a cancer in that one regard. But there are so many other benefits that they could be working on that would wipe all of that out in an instant if they would just turn away from the lies. That's the biggest hurdle they have, and that's what my biggest takeaway is now that I'm able to sit back here and talk with you today. That's what it means to me, is that the age of injustice and using or holding your lies and your ability to lie above all else is absolutely walking in the other direction than they should be.
Yeah. No, I mean, I usually when I talk to humanity, I use the word good and evil because sometimes it sure seems like it. And like when I talk to Bassett and others, they don't like to frame aliens in good or evil because it's much more complex than that. And maybe that's true of humanity, but it's scary to think about the God complex that some people have, and the ends will always justify the means. Now I want to get to my favorite, the one I guess in one sense I like the most is the one where they rescue you. I mean, that's the one that's an amazing story. But the other one kind of appeals to my childhood, and that is the Gumby type alien. And so where exactly did that happen? What were the circumstances? What was going on? I love that story. He said he was kind of flopping, like, leaning forward, and reminded you a little bit of Gumby.
Oh shoot!
Is that in Nellis too?
Oh, that's the one where he was like
the blue skin.
Yeah, the blue skinned, the blue tinted skinned one that was on the Nellis test range, and we have video footage of his craft being on the range as well. But yeah, you could call it Gumby, but it was kind of like somebody running in the face of like a hurricane wind. He was leaning way forward, more forward than I would be running. There was no arm swing. They just kind of dangled at his side and flopped around behind him like the Aquaman movie when he's running with his brother and his brother don't know how to run on land, and his arms are just flapping around behind him, that kind of thing. But he's running real fast. He looked kind of like that, honestly. So yeah, I think that's where the Gumby thing got stuck in your head, is that he was just kind of
the way you were looking at flopping or something, like they didn't have any strength or something. I think I think the term was brought up somewhere along the way, Gumby, and so I've officially named it the Gumby one. May not be accurate, but
I know why you got the Gumby idea, because I told you what the name of the that they gave to that picture I made of him to the intel community, and before it came out in the film from James Fox and everything, that everybody in the intel community called him Squidward.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's what's stuck in your head, is that he's kind of got floppy arms or whatever.
Well, somewhere along the way, I'll have to go back, maybe listen again. But I swore that Gumby. But anyway, it was just an interesting image of him leaning forward, and everything that you saw. Now, how tall was that one?
I stand about 6 foot exactly. He was about half a foot shorter, so about 5'5".
Okay. Now here's where we're getting towards the end, but I want to touch on this a little bit because you brought it up. Is our government either directly or indirectly working with aliens?
Directly.
Okay. Is there more than one species that we're involved with?
Yes.
And are some of those species maybe not so nice?
One is, that I know of, yes.
One is not nice?
They are aware of them. I'm not sure if they're working with them, but they are aware of them, and they know that they're not nice.
Okay, so the ones we're working with are considered the
reptilians,
the constructive ones versus destructive ones. I'll use my terminology pretty careful. And so how does it make you feel? I mean, we've touched a little bit on it, but how does it make you feel that there is this gigantic truth out there? And you don't have to get into all of the details or all of the security stuff, all the technology, but just the basic premise that we're not alone. How does it make you feel that they're keeping that basic truth that every human being has a right to know from us?
The way I feel about it is, this is a right for every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth. This is the only thing, I believe, that is still remaining as a veil over our eyes in what we see, do, and hear. And I say that knowing full well that this has likely been going on for thousands of years, if not longer,
Right.
Many millennia. And it's been the same presence in different phases of our development, so to speak. They have always been involved in our governments. They have always been involved with us. And that we are still surviving. So they have, and I know that they have the tech to take us out if they ever wanted to, but they have not. The only time it came close was with the deluge, the flooding of the earth, which has been proven by science and archaeology all over the world that did occur. That was the closest we came to total extinction as humankind, as far as I know, other than the Ice Age. And so we're still here, and they're still here. There's a reason for that. No, they're not all nice, but guess what? The nice ones seem to have the upper hand because the bad ones would have done something worse to us if...
Right, we're still here.
Yeah, if the good ones weren't intervening for us on that behalf,
Right.
We'd be toast.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Now, I wanted to share this with you because I thought it was interesting. What Gary said, he says, I think telepathy will turn out to be the universal language. And I thought, you don't need translators, I think, with telepathy, because it seems like everybody hears them in their own language, regardless of what their language is. So I think that, that would be hopefully someday we will all get to the point where we can do telepathy, where we can communicate without needing a translator, or we halfway understand stuff. Now, you went to Arrow. Can you kind of, let me go ahead and show this first. I want to put the proof up there. This is the documentation showing the email that you got from Arrow. And it's right there for everybody to see. And so I want to make sure that everybody knows that that is there as well. So we have that. So you went to Arrow. So what was your experience like at Arrow?
Well, as I said, Congress asked me to go to Arrow and give them my
So you went
testimony.
to Congress first, and then you went to Arrow second, correct?
Right. Late November, I went to Congress in 2022. Then 2023, January, late January, is when I was with Arrow and gave my testimony there. I got to meet Sean Kirkpatrick and his second in command. They were the only two in the room with me. And I told them everything that I told Congress. I could tell by some of the reactions that Sean had that he was not a believer, that he didn't want to hear some of the things I had said. And he actually kind of misrepresented some of the things I said in his report as well. A couple of statements he made were not what I told him, but what he wished I had told him, or were more like his opinion about what I told him. So I didn't like that. So that was not a good experience with Arrow. I'm hoping that this new director does a much better job.
Kozlowski.
Yeah, Kozlowski. He seems like an honest broker, but he's still attached to the leadership.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I've heard tell that there's nothing he can say that hasn't been vetted by the Pentagon.
So if you got an invitation today, and say we could go back in time, would you, if you could do it over again, would you go to Arrow?
Yes, I would, because it actually
Got it in record.
It led to other things, and it documented the record, at least for me and the other whistleblowers that went there.
Well, from everything I'm getting from you is, like I said, I know that I've had different guests on, and most of the people I'm with are pro disclosure, and Congress do it the right way. Lou, everybody. But I get the idea. The last one was there's a growing sentiment among people that it's not going to happen through the government, and it kind of showed itself a little bit in my last podcast. And I mean, no disrespect either way. I don't have a dog in the fight. All I want is disclosure, and I don't. If it comes through the government, I'm happy. If it comes through the public sector, if it comes through NHI itself, it doesn't matter to me how we get there. But I'm guessing you're going to be in the court of, let's keep putting the pressure on. Let's keep having hearings. Let's keep bringing whistleblowers on. I've asked this in my last 3 podcasts. But the one thing that has been missing, I mean, we're talking about crash retrieval. We're talking about reverse engineering, things that 20 years ago, everybody, Bob Lazar, whoever, he'd call you crazy. And I know there's some issues with Bob Lazar, but I'm saying a lot of the problem was what he said that people just couldn't believe. And now we're talking about it openly, especially since David Grush came out and did that. We're talking about alien bodies now. We're talking about non-human biologics. Doesn't it? I mean, we're, like I said to you earlier, what are we going to do in the next hearing? If we're going to continue to bring whistleblowers with the same information or similar information, how's that going to move the ball forward? Isn't it time to bring credible whistleblowers like you, like Mario Woods, like Whitley Strieber, like Deborah Jordan Cobble? I mean, isn't it time to bring the experiencers and the abductees in, so that Congress and everybody can hear, those who've had actual contact, like you have with the dying alien, and the one when you were a kid, someone who's, not just worked in a program where they studied it, but people who've had like hands-on, firsthand experience with this stuff. Do you think it's time, or do you think we're not ready?
No, we're definitely ready. And the reason I believe that is now you have, just think what Congress was saying last year as opposed to this year. We have congressmen and women saying, this is real. What I've been shown shows biologics and crash retrievals. They've seen them, but they haven't released that footage in pictures or whatever else because it's still classified and being talked about. That's the big difference this year. And any further testimony from whistleblowers will also be strengthened by that. The other benefit is that this year, since Congress is now convinced that this is real, we're not alone, that they are now building the kinds of steps of legal process to protect people like myself and other whistleblowers They are willing to listen now to MK Ultra because they're finding documents on that too, and all the other chicanery that's been going on with the CIA. That's what people are ignoring, in I guess, in favor of continuing the pressure in some people's eyes. But some people are just never going to be satisfied because you have already heard, hear me, America and the rest of the world, you have already heard from the most credible witnesses you will ever see on the stand in Congress, people with polygraphs telling you what they saw and experienced. It doesn't get any better than that unless you want to take the 3rd Infantry to some of these bases and just take everybody hostage and just pillage every document and video that they have in their possession. That's the only thing that's going to break through and show that these places do conduct this type of activity. But even then, I would imagine there's still going to be a cadre of people that are just, oh, I still don't believe it. This was all AI, all those tanks, going into the place. They're going to start coming up with more like I said, there's no end to these couch potatoes imaginations. They should work for Disney, honestly.
Right.
But the serious people should know this is a big step this year. Mm-hmm. They actually have Congress and Congress telling them the exact same thing the whistleblowers have. We're finally at the gate and walking through the gate now.
Okay. Well, let's get to the final question. What do you think experiencers need the most right now?
Protection.
Experiencers or whistleblowers?
Sometimes
think about it.
Sometimes, okay. Because when I think about my targeted individuals that have actually suffered abuses by the CIA and things like that, they need protection too.
Okay. What's another thing that experiencers might need? We were talking about this a little bit, maybe some support groups. Then we have a discussion about the idea that, you know what it's like, Jason. Yeah, if you had a group to go to, that would have made your experience. It would have been traumatic, but it would have helped, right? If you had an experiencer group to go to.
Correct. There's nothing like having a brother in arms standing next to you. That's why veterans who go to war, when they come home, that's the most meaningful group that they can attach themselves to, is because people understand what they've been through. And the same thing with the experiencers. Some of the stuff is so shocking, they need people like them. And that's the kind of groups we need. And then if I were to laundry list, a quick list is just whistleblowers should be afforded legal counsel immediately upon whistleblowing.
Right.
Their clearances should be frozen so nobody can touch it, because that's how they got to me and several others. But the other thing is, during that limbo time, and sometimes it lasts years, you have no income a lot of times. So
like Dylan Borland, isn't that what happened to him? Then they really go after him that way?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let me give you some groups that have been out there and are out there. Let's talk about, and I'll have a question at the end of this. Yvonne Smith, friend of mine in Transparency. She's a hypnotherapist. I've actually had a few sessions with her. She's got a group called CERO, and it's Close Encounters Research Organization, and it's set up to help experiencers transition, through the trauma and to get to a point of healing, where it just doesn't overwhelm their life. And her groups, she's got an in-person one there close to Pasadena. Then she's also got a Zoom. Now, I've studied on Bud Hopkins, and I really like what he did. And I mean, there's no pun intended here, but he did what I call the buddy system. He would, whenever somebody new would come, like when Deborah came to him to tell about her story, and he wrote that whole book, the large part of it was about her. He connected her with another lady named Sue, which I'm guessing that wasn't her real name for the book, but she had already gone through the process. She'd already been investigated. The only stipulation was that she couldn't share anything from her case with a younger one, but it was like the buddy system. And I thought that would be awesome you know, that if we had something like that. The other one was legendary Harvard psychiatrist John Mack. You know, he had an in-person group. Unfortunately, when he died, it died with him, and that's the danger. If we have a single person leading it, you need something that will carry on after you're gone. But both of those, you know, John Mack and Bud Hopkins, those groups no longer exist as far as I know. Hopefully Yvonne's Ciro group will live on, you know, beyond her as well. But if you could start an experiencer support group, what format would you use? Would it be one of those three, or would you come up with something different?
I like the hypnotherapy might be helpful in some cases, but I'm not a psychiatrist. I do appreciate talking to other people that are experiencers. It's very therapeutic, even every day when I meet them, you know, because I get a lot of people that chat with me and want to tell me their story, and I get a lot out of that as well as them. And they also thank me a lot of times to say that, yeah, thank you for listening. I just feel like I could talk to you. And that's what I feel the groups can offer. So I'm very big on the group thing, or any way you can communicate with experiencers. Like on X, it's a good place or Signal is another app that I use. And we just talk, you know. Sometimes there's a few of us, sometimes there's a group of us.
Right.
It just kind of depends on the setting, because sometimes I only want to talk to like people that I really know.
That's the hardest thing, because you know about my experiencer group is that it's when you're in person, it's a different dynamic. When you have one that's online and you have people from multiple countries and multiple backgrounds, you know, it's a little more difficult. But I really do appreciate the group. You definitely add a lot to it. As far as interaction, Mario does the same thing. You know, just I guess I broke my own rule. Sorry. Anyway, it's just we're talking about helping people, and let's just leave it in that context. The people in the group are there to help each other, and you know, so that's what we need more of. We need groups that where experiencers can go to and talk to other experiencers and get help and help them walk through this journey so that their life, you know, it's upside down. Especially, you know, I mean, I think you're talking another level though when you're talking about the experiencers that are involved with the military and the programs that you've gone through. I mean, it's a different kind of experience in that sense from the person that's just, you know, the civilian who's abducted. It doesn't mean it's any less traumatic,
Yeah.
but it's a different experience, you know.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. You're right. There is a big difference with a military whistleblower or a corporate whistleblower. They seem to be the ones that are assassinated. So there also is a flavor of needing, you know, no kidding, protective custody, you know, kind of a thing, or a security detail on those people until they get through their wickets so that they're safe again. And the people that need to be behind bars are behind bars. But we don't see that happening. It seems to be in favor of the process is in favor of let's not do anything just yet, you know, and then the next thing you know, somebody disappears.
Right.
You know,
Right. You know, we keep track of each other as well and keep tabs. And, you know, I started a Signal group just for X people, my friends on X, because some of them were getting locked out and it was a safe place to go and reconnect. And I guess what I'm hearing you saying, it wouldn't be nice that if somebody disappears, that there's enough people out there that will sound the alarm and make sure that it gets a lot of attention.
that's exactly what it feels like. And the bigger the group sessions, sometimes there's the fear also in the back of my head that plays sometimes, and that is, you know, they're good people, but you know, maybe they talk to their wife or their kid, and something you said that was in confidence, they tell somebody else, and then maybe they're not as good at telling their wife or whoever they told not to say it to anybody else, but then the wife tells the neighbors and the neighbors tell so-and-so. The next thing you know, you're compromised.
And I violated that rule. I mentioned a couple of people in it and I should have never said that. And so I want to apologize about that. I'm usually really, really good, but we were talking about the group and you had mentioned Signal. And so it just kind of came out because nobody should know who's in the group. And that was my bad.
it's just one of those things. But that's easier to handle than a corporate person finding out about you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the whole thing, and that's why you got to be a bit diplomatic in the way that you describe what you've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I don't have a chip on my shoulder, but the process definitely needs to change, and that's what I'm more frustrated about. So I'm not targeting somebody and telling, you know, so-and-so from X company needs to put a bullet in their head, you know, or something like that, like they wanted to do me or whatever. You'll never hear that come out of my mouth, but, you know, they would think that, you know, the corporate people do that. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, there's still some restraints and limitations in what you can do publicly as opposed to in a group, small group, as opposed to a large group even. All those things recategorize the way that I speak to people. And I'm not holding back. It's just certain things I won't say because I'm not sure who's in the room. And that kind of thing does happen and plays a part in all of it. Because I know that some of my whistleblower friends have said less, and sometimes they've been harmed.
Well, that's the key thing is, I mean, you've got to feel like what you tell someone that they're not going to run out and tell everybody else. That's why I'm kind of beating myself up that I even mentioned, you know, a couple people in the group, because that's, you know, that's a rule that I have. And I just, you know, and I'm really good at keeping secrets. That's what I do for a living and stuff. So that one's going to bother me for a while. But anyway, thank you so much, Jason, for coming on. Just tremendous experience. There's a lot that I think people learned today. Maybe there's some new people that came on and, you know, they've learned a lot more about what it's like to be an experiencer. Maybe there's some people that are, you know, military, ex-military or in the military, and they're going through hell. And you just, you know, you just showed them you're not alone.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your experiences. I appreciate it. I'll pull you out and I'm going to close out the video, the podcast. Thank you, Jason, so much for coming on.
Thank you, Dale.
Well, I want to thank everyone for watching the podcast. Like I said, we value every person that comes on, and we value every person that, you know, supports this channel in their own way by sharing it, by liking it. I think last week I got a super chat. That was the first time I ever got one, so I didn't even know what to do with it, but I want to give a shout out for that one as well. But if you like the channel, if you like what we're doing, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you.
Woke up in a parking lot, shoes on wrong, phone long gone, taste of metal on my tongue, sky still buzzing in my lungs, flashes in a stereo blue, voices shaped like colored glass, every question I could ask, answered then it doubled back.